Tell someone you're an only child and watch their face. There's often a tiny flicker, a little, "Ah, that explains it," because everyone thinks they already know exactly what only children are. Spoiled, selfish, bad at sharing, a little lonely, a little odd, used to getting their way and never quite over it. There's even a name for the supposed condition: only child syndrome. It's one of the most confident assumptions our culture makes about a person, based on a single fact about their family. And here's the strange part: it's almost entirely wrong. Nearly everything you think you know about the psychology of only children is a myth. And we can trace that myth, remarkably, back to one man over a century ago who got it spectacularly wrong. His name was G. Stanley Hall, and in the late 1800s, he was one of the most influential psychologists in America. He helped build the entire field, and he and his colleagues looked at only children and declared, and I'm quoting almost directly here, that being an only child is a disease in itself. A disease. That was the verdict from the top of the profession. Only children were doomed to be maladjusted, selfish, and strange, simply for having no siblings. And because Ho was so respected, that idea didn't just float around. It sank deep into the culture and stayed there for over 100 years, quietly shaping how people judge every only child they meet, including, maybe, how you've been judged your whole life. So here's the obvious question: was he right? And this is where the actual science walks in and demolishes the whole thing. Because decades later, a researcher named Tony Falbo decided to actually test the stereotype instead of just repeating it. And she didn't run one small study. She and a colleague gathered together more than 100 studies on only children, covering in total hundreds of thousands of people, and analyzed all of it at once. It's one of the most thorough looks at the question ever done. And what did all that data show? That the only child syndrome basically doesn't exist. Only children were not more selfish, not lonelier, not less likable, not socially stunted. On measure after measure, they were just as well-adjusted and just as sociable as people who grew up with a house full of siblings. The disease G. Stanley Hall diagnosed was a fiction. But the research found something even more interesting than just no difference. Because on two specific things, only children actually scored slightly higher: achievement motivation and intelligence. Read that again. The kids everyone wrote off as spoiled and stunted tend, if anything, to be a little more driven and a little sharper than average. So how on earth did the spoiled cliché get the story so completely backwards? The answer is in one simple word: resources. Think about what an only child actually gets. Every other kid in a family splits the pie. They share their parents' time, their attention, their money, their energy, their patience, with one or two or five other little humans all pulling in different directions. An only child splits none of it. They get the whole pie. All the conversation, all the books, all the help with homework, all the focus, undivided, for an entire childhood. Psychologists who study birth order have a useful way of seeing this. An only child is, in effect, a permanent firstborn, a firstborn who is never dethroned. They get that intense, focused first child attention, and then, crucially, a sibling never arrives to take it away. The spotlight that most firstborns lose, only children keep forever. And when a child grows up, bathed in that much adult attention and conversation, getting all the resources instead of a fraction, a small edge in things like vocabulary, knowledge, and drive isn't magic. It's just arithmetic. And that undivided adult world shapes them in another way the stereotype gets exactly wrong. Only children tend to spend far more of their early years around adults than around other kids. So while the myth says they're socially awkward, what actually happens is that they often become unusually articulate, mature, and comfortable in adult company. They're the kid at the dinner party who can hold a real conversation with the grown-ups. They were, in a sense, fluent in adult before they could ride a bike. And because they spent so much time without a built-in playmate, they tend to develop something genuinely valuable: a deep comfort with their own company. Only children are more likely to have rich, imaginative inner worlds, to entertain themselves, to be perfectly content alone, in a way that people who grew up in a crowd sometimes never learn. They didn't fail to develop social skills. They picked those up just fine at school. What they developed on top of it was a relationship with solitude that most people would honestly envy. So far, this is sounding like a quiet win for the only child. More driven, sharper, articulate, independent, at peace alone. But here's where it gets more personal, and a lot heavier, because the very thing that gives only children their gifts is also the source of their hardest burden. Undivided attention has a shadow side. Undivided expectation. Because when you're the only one, you are also the only one carrying the entire weight of your parents' hopes. There are no siblings to spread it across. Every dream they have for their family, every ambition, every anxiety, every ounce of "we just want you" to succeed, all of it points at one child, you. And that pressure is real. Many only children grow up as quiet perfectionists, feeling that they have to be the success, the good kid, the one who makes it all worth it. Because there's no one else to share that job with. Some grow up feeling responsible for their parents' happiness itself. Like the entire emotional weather of the household rests on them. The same spotlight that gave you all the resources also means there is nowhere to hide when you fall short. And there's a weight that waits further down the road. One only children think about more than they let on. Aging parents. Because someday, the people who gave you everything will need to be cared for, and an only child faces that alone. No brother to split the visits with. No sister to share the hard decisions, the costs, the exhaustion. The full circle of being the only one, the undivided love at the start, becomes the undivided responsibility at the end. It's one of the quiet anxieties of the only child experience, and it's a completely rational one. Now, before we wrap up, there's a fascinating wrinkle worth being honest about, because the science isn't perfectly one-sided. There's a well-known study that looked at the generation of only children born under China's one-child policy, an entire society of only children created by law. And it found some differences, that those only children were, on average, a little less trusting, a bit more risk-averse. But, and this is the important part, that's a very specific situation. An entire nation engineered into only childhood is a completely different thing from one family who simply chose or could only have a single kid. And even those findings are debated. The honest takeaway is this: there is no single only child personality. Context matters enormously. The lazy stereotype is wrong, but so is any neat little box. So here's what I actually want you to take from all of this. If you're an only child, you are not the spoiled, selfish cliché that one 19th century psychologist invented and the culture lazily repeated ever since. The data simply does not support it. What's true is far more interesting. You were shaped by getting all of something that most people only ever got a slice of. All the attention, all the resources, all the love, and yes, all the expectation, and one day, all the responsibility. That undivided focus is exactly why so many only children grow up capable, driven, articulate, and genuinely at home in their own company. And the weight you sometimes feel, the pressure to be enough for two parents, all by yourself, that isn't a flaw in you either. It's just the other side of having been, for two people, their entire world. You were never a disease, and you were never a stereotype. You were someone's whole pie. And that comes with everything. The gifts and the weight both. If this hit home, go ahead and subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel. And if you want to support these deeper dives, hit the join button to become a member. I'll see you in the next one. Notes. It's built on the reframe formula and the research is all real. G. Stanley Hall's infamous "A Disease in Itself" line as the myth's origin. Tony Falbo's huge meta-analysis debunking it. And the slight achievement intelligence edge. The permanent firstborn never dethroned framing, the adult-oriented solitude upside, the undivided expectation and soul caregiver weight, and the Little Emperor's China one-child policy study handled carefully as a context-specific wrinkle. It also quietly rhymes with your oldest child video, the resources dethronement thread, without repeating it.